Most people pick Medellín before they've spent a single night in Bogotá. They see the weather, the hills, the co-working culture, and they stop looking. What they miss is that Bogotá, a city almost nobody on the expat YouTube circuit takes seriously, is quietly outperforming Medellín on infrastructure, professional opportunity, and long-term stability for a specific kind of man. And that same man has been getting on the wrong plane for years. I'm Alex. I've lived in 4 Latin American cities over the last 9 years. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear framework for deciding which of these 2 cities actually fits your situation. Not based on vibes, but based on real costs, real trade-offs, and what each city rewards after the first 90 days. Before we dive in, please subscribe so you don't miss future city breakdowns. I cover this stuff on a regular basis, and it's all aimed at helping you make a decision you can actually live with. Now, let's get into it. Cost of living. Let me give you the honest version of the cost conversation because the numbers you see in most YouTube videos are either outdated or carefully selected to make the city look cheap. In Medellín, if you want to live in El Poblado or the Provenza corridor, which is where most foreigners land and honestly where the infrastructure and English support systems are strongest, you're looking at $1,200 to $1,800 per month for a comfortable furnished 2-bedroom apartment. That range has moved up meaningfully over the last 3 years. El Poblado has been gentrifying in real time, and the areas that foreign content creators use to call hidden gems are now priced like they're visible. If you go to Laureles or Envigado, you can get that same 2-bedroom for $900 to $1,500. But you're trading the walkability and the expats support network for more local texture. That's a legitimate trade to make. Just make it consciously. In Bogotá, in the neighborhoods that are actually livable for someone coming from the U.S., Chapinero Alto, Rosales, Zona G, Usaquén, a comparable 2-bedroom runs $100 to $700 furnished. On paper, that looks similar to Medellín, but the day-to-day costs diverge pretty sharply from there. Food in Bogotá is cheaper at the neighborhood market level. A decent lunch at a local restaurant, not tourist pricing, just a solid set menu runs you $5 to $8. In El Poblado, the same quality of lunch is $9 to $14 because the neighborhood has priced itself for foreigners. Groceries in Bogotá, at a place like Carula or Éxito, are roughly 10 to 15% less than comparable markets in the Poblado corridor. The hidden cost most people miss in Medellín is what I'd call the tourism premium. Medellín has become one of the most searched cities in all of South America by international travelers and potential residents. That demand has pushed prices across restaurants, services, and rentals in the foreigner-heavy areas. You're not always paying Colombian prices in El Poblado. You're paying a weird hybrid price that splits the difference between what Colombians pay and what the market thinks you can afford. In Bogotá, that tourism premium exists, but it's diluted. The city is enormous, 9 million people, and it has an actual domestic professional class that drives the economy. The pricing in Chapinero or Rosales reflects what Colombian professionals and executives pay, not what a digital nomad pipeline has pushed rents to. That distinction matters more than the headline number. Transportation is another line item people consistently underestimate. In Medellín, the metro system is excellent for what it covers, but it doesn't cover El Poblado worth a damn for daily use. You'll be in Ubers constantly if you live there. Budget $80 to $120 a month on transport in Medellín if you're in the expat corridor. In Bogotá, the Transmilenio is genuinely expansive, covers most of the city, and combined with Uber and occasional taxis, your monthly transport budget runs closer to $60 to $90. It's not a city-making difference, but it's real. Private health insurance, a non-negotiable if you're living here on a tourist or digital nomad visa and not enrolled in a local system, runs $80 to $150 a month in both cities for a mid-tier plan. The actual healthcare quality conversation is different, and I'll get to that in infrastructure. The realistic all-in monthly budget for a single man living well, not extravagantly, but not pinching, in El Poblado is $2,800 to $3,800. In the comparable Bogotá neighborhoods, you're at $2,600 to $3,500. The gap is real but not dramatic. What changes the calculus isn't the raw number. It's what that budget buys you in terms of lifestyle, professional environment, and livability. That's the actual question. Infrastructure, this is where the conversation shifts, and it's where Bogotá tends to quietly outperform. Let's start with internet, because for remote workers, this is the determining factor more than almost anything else. Bogotá has the better fiber infrastructure, full stop. You can get reliable symmetric 300 megabit fiber in Chapinero or Rosales for around $35 to $50 a month. Consistency is high. In Medellín, particularly in apartment buildings that haven't been updated, the connection quality is more variable. The advertised speeds look fine on paper, but the actual performance under load, multiple video calls, cloud uploads, simultaneous use, can degrade. The co-working scene in Medellín has expanded to compensate for this, but it means you're spending $150 to $250 a month on a co-working membership as infrastructure insurance rather than for the community. In Bogotá, good co-working exists in Zona G and Chapinero, but for many remote workers, the home connection is stable enough to be your primary setup. Healthcare. This is underexplored in most expat content. Bogotá has the best hospital system in Colombia, period. The Fundación Santa Fe and the Clínica del Country are genuinely excellent facilities that attract Colombian specialists from across the country. When I've needed medical care in Colombia, and 9 years of living abroad means you eventually do, I've always chosen to deal with it in Bogotá if the situation allowed. Medellín has solid health care, particularly at places like Clínica Medellín and the CES University Hospital, but the concentration of top-tier specialists leans Bogotá. If you have any ongoing health condition that requires specialist management, this should be part of your calculation. Visa structure is identical for both cities. You're operating under Colombian national law regardless of which city you're in. The digital nomad visa, the rentista visa for people with passive income, the cédula de extranjería process once you're on a longer-term pathway, all of it applies the same way in Medellín and Bogotá. There's no city-specific visa advantage. What differs is where you'd actually go to deal with the bureaucracy. Bogotá has the main Migración Colombia offices, which for complex visa situations can matter. For routine renewals and tourist extensions, the Medellín offices handle it fine. Banking in Colombia has gotten easier for foreigners in the last 2 years, but it's still not simple. Bancolombia has the widest branch and ATM network. Nequi and DaviPlata function well as digital options once you have a cédula or RUT. Bogotá has significantly more bank branches, more notarias for document legalization, and more English-speaking commercial staff if you're working on the financial setup for a business or property. That's a practical advantage if your situation is complicated. Transit. Medellín wins the aesthetics of transit. The metro is genuinely one of the best urban rail systems in Latin America. Clean, punctual, integrated with the cable cars, but its coverage footprint is limited. Bogotá's Transmilenio is more comprehensive in terms of geographic reach, but it's also overcrowded during peak hours in a way that makes it uncomfortable for daily use. The honest answer for most expats is that in both cities, you'll supplement public transit with Uber and InDriver, and the cost difference is marginal. Neither city is a city where you can realistically go car-free and never feel the limitation. Altitude note: Bogotá is 1,600 meters above sea level. That's roughly 8,500 feet. For the first week or two, many people feel it. Headaches, shortness of breath, fatigue faster than expected. If you have cardiovascular or respiratory issues, Bogotá's altitude is a genuine medical consideration you should discuss with a doctor before committing to a long stay. Medellín is at about 1,500 meters, which most people adjust to within a day or two. This sounds like a minor detail until it's not. I've watched men who were excited about Bogotá cut their stays short because the altitude genuinely affected their day-to-day function, lifestyle, and cultural feel. This is probably where the two cities diverge most dramatically, and where the decision gets personal. Medellín has an energy that's hard to describe without leaning into cliché, so let me try to be precise about it. The city moves at a pace that feels designed for enjoyment. Outdoor culture, cafe culture, neighborhood walks along Provenza on a Saturday, people doing business over lunch that stretches into the mid-afternoon. The climate is the entire backdrop for this. 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit most of the year, low humidity in the Poblado Hills, zero heating or air conditioning bills ever. Weather in Medellín functions as a lifestyle amplifier. People are simply outside more. Events are possible year-round in a way that feels effortless. The city has a social fabric that pulls you toward community, almost whether you want it to or not. The social scene for foreigners in Medellín is large, well-organized, and sometimes overwhelmingly concentrated. In El Poblado and Laureles, you will find no shortage of expat networking events, language exchanges, and informal communities of remote workers. That's a genuine asset in the first 6 months when you're building your network. The downside is that the expat community can become a bubble, and the bubble is getting bigger. I've talked to men who've lived in El Poblado for 18 months, and their entire social world is still other foreigners plus a small circle of Colombians who move in that same scene. That's a real pattern. Whether it's a problem depends on what you're looking for, but it's worth being honest about. Bogotá's social culture is fundamentally different in character. Bogotanos, the people actually from the city, not the transplants, have a reputation for being reserved, formal, and slower to open up than paisas from Medellín. That reputation is largely accurate. The city has a more European professional feel. People dress more conservatively. Business relationships take longer to develop. Casual friendships at a bar happen, but the rhythm of social trust moves slower. For someone who's used to American professional culture and finds Medellín's relentless sociability a little exhausting, Bogotá can feel like a genuine relief. For someone who wants to hit the ground running socially, Bogotá will feel colder. What Bogotá has that Medellín does not is depth of cultural infrastructure. Bogotá is the intellectual and institutional capital of Colombia. The theater scene, the live music scene beyond the reggaeton circuit, the film culture, the gallery system, the literary events, the conferences, all of it concentrates in Bogotá in a way it simply doesn't in Medellín. If you care about that layer of urban life, and not everyone does, which is a completely legitimate position, Bogotá rewards it over time in a way that Medellín doesn't. The food conversation. In Medellín, the restaurant scene in Poblado and Laureles has gotten genuinely excellent. There are real chefs doing real work, and the variety is impressive. But it's partially tourist-driven. In Bogotá, the restaurant ecosystem is more organic. It's there because 9 million people with actual disposable income are eating there, not because the Instagram algorithm told Airbnb visitors to go. The Zona G area has some of the best restaurants in Colombia. The Mercado de la Perseverancia in Chapinero is a legitimate food destination that most foreigners never find. I want to know, which city are you actually considering? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone and it helps me decide what to cover next. Bogotá's weather requires honest conversation. It rains. A lot. The city has a running joke. Sometimes the weather changes 4 times in a single day. You will own a jacket and an umbrella in Bogotá, and you will use both regularly. The temperature stays in the 45 to 65 Fahrenheit range most of the time. Cool, sometimes outright cold, almost never warm. For people who come from climates where warmth is the norm, Bogotá's weather is either refreshing or demoralizing, depending on the person. After 3 or 4 months of gray skies and cool drizzle, some people are completely done. Others find it activating. It pushes you indoors toward work, reading, cooking, the kinds of habits that build structure. You need to be honest with yourself about which person you are, who it suits. Let me be direct here, because this is the question that actually determines which city is right for you. Medellín tends to suit the man who is in a transitional phase, coming out of a difficult period in the U.S., wanting warmth in every sense of the word, wanting a community that's ready-made, wanting the reward feeling like daily life is pleasant without a lot of effort. That's not a criticism. That's a real and legitimate need. If you've been grinding in a high-cost, high-pressure American city for 15 years and you need the reset, Medellín's is very good at the reset. The climate, the walkability in Poblado, the social ease, the cafe on every corner life. It gives you that. It also suits the man who is building something that doesn't require a sophisticated local professional network. If you're a content creator, a solo SaaS operator, a freelance designer, a coach, someone whose income is entirely US-facing, Medellín gives you everything you need with very little friction. The infrastructure is good enough, the lifestyle is excellent, and the cost of living is forgiving enough that you have margin while you build. Where Medellín struggles is with the man who wants professional depth in Colombia itself. If you want local clients, local partnerships, local equity in Colombian business, the city is a starting point, not a destination. The real Colombian business infrastructure lives in Bogotá, end of story. Bogotá tends to suit a different profile. Men who are a bit further along, who've done the first pass of Latin American living, who know what they want, who don't need the social scaffolding that Poblado provides. Men who find the quiet of a cold city productive. Men who are trying to build actual relationships with Colombian professionals. Who want proximity to institutional life. Who are doing anything that intersects with law, finance, government, or media in Colombia. It also tends to suit men who are more introverted than the average Medellín expat. The city rewards patience. The friendships you build in Bogotá tend to be slower to form and deeper in character. The Bogotá social fabric, once you're actually inside it, is rich, but it takes longer to access. Age matters here too. This isn't something people say enough. Medellín's expat infrastructure and social culture skews younger, late 20s to early 40s. The pace, the nightlife, the startup energy. That's not an absolute rule, but it's a real tendency. Bogotá draws a somewhat older and more professionally settled expat profile. If you're in your late 40s or 50s and you're thinking about a long-term setup rather than a high-energy experiment, Bogotá is worth taking more seriously than your YouTube algorithm is probably suggesting. The trade-offs: both cities have genuine costs, not financial costs, but the costs of choosing one path over another. Let me name them directly. If you choose Medellín, you are accepting a social environment that has become more saturated with foreigners in the past 3 years and will continue to get more so. A restaurant and service economy that has partially repriced itself for international visitors. A plateau in professional depth if your ambitions eventually become Colombia-facing. And the security situation, which has meaningfully improved since the early 2000s but remains present in a way you can't fully ignore. Medellín is not dangerous for most foreigners living in Poblado or Laureles. But it's not Zurich. There are areas you don't go, patterns of behavior you develop, situational awareness that becomes habitual. That's real. What Medellín gives up in exchange is this. It gives you nothing. The weather, the lifestyle, the social ease. Medellín over-delivers on quality of day-to-day life in a way that few cities in Latin America match at a similar price point. If you choose Bogotá, you are accepting weather that requires psychological adjustment, a steeper social curve, altitude that is a real factor for some people, and a city that demands more effort to access its rewards. It will not meet you halfway in the way Medellín does. You will not stumble out of your apartment into a pleasant day and a convivial cafe culture that makes you feel like you made the right call. You will have to build that life more intentionally. What Bogotá gives in return: institutional depth, professional infrastructure, a more diverse expat community that skews toward people who are doing something rather than escaping something, a cultural life that rewards engagement and the sense, which some men find genuinely valuable, of being in a major international city that takes itself seriously. Bogotá punches at the level of Santiago and Lima in terms of its professional ecosystem. Medellín doesn't. The hidden trade-off nobody talks about is what I'd call the trajectory divergence. Over a 12-month stay, the man who chose Medellín and the man who chose Bogotá are living different versions of their Latin American life. The Medellín man has a richer surface life, more spontaneous experiences, more social density, more photogenic daily existence. The Bogotá man, if he's done it right, has built a deeper network, a better understanding of how Colombia actually works at the institutional level, and a more durable foundation for anything he wants to build long-term in South America. Neither of those is wrong, but they're not the same outcome. The verdict: so which city is actually better for foreigners in 2026? The answer is that it depends on a specific variable that most people don't examine before they choose. Time horizon. If you're planning a 6 to 18-month stay, a serious experiment, not a vacation, but not a permanent decision, Medellín is almost certainly the right answer. The infrastructure is optimized for exactly that kind of stay. The expat community is robust enough to get you oriented quickly. The lifestyle return on your investment of time is fast, and the cost structure gives you margin to figure out your next move. For a first serious stint in Colombia, Medellín is where you learn the country. If you're planning a 2+ year commitment to Colombia, or if you're looking at Colombia as the base for something bigger, whether that's a business, a property play, a serious integration into the professional class, Bogotá deserves more weight than it's getting in most expat conversations right now. The infrastructure advantage, the professional depth, and the long-term social network you can build there are real and compounding. The city is less seductive than Medellín. It asks more of, but over a multi-year horizon, it often returns more. There is also a third possibility that I'd be remiss not to name. Some men do both. Medellín first, 6 to 12 months, get your Colombian foundation built. The language, the bank account, the social bearings, then Bogotá, where you go deeper on whatever the actual work is. That sequencing is underrated. You don't have to choose once and commit forever. If you're still unsure, here's the cleanest diagnostic question. What do you want your Tuesday to look like? If you want your Tuesday to be pleasant almost automatically, warm, walkable, socially easy, beautiful surroundings, productive without effort, that's Medellín. If you want your Tuesday to be productive in a more demanding way, if you want Tuesday to feel like you're inside something serious and complex, if you want the depth to slowly emerge from the investment, that's Bogotá. Both cities are real. Both cities work. The mistake is treating this as a question that has a universal answer. Closing, here's what this comparison actually reveals, underneath the cost comparisons and the neighborhood breakdowns. Colombia has two cities that serve fundamentally different versions of the same aspiration. Both are legitimate. Both have worked for real people over sustained periods of time. The problem is that most men arrive with a city already chosen and look for evidence to confirm it, rather than honestly asking which city fits the specific life they're trying to build. The truth bomb I want to leave you with is this: the city doesn't make the life, you do. Medellín has men who've been there for 4 years and are stuck. Bogotá has men who arrived knowing nobody and built something durable. The quality of your outcome in either city will track far more closely with the clarity of what you're trying to build than with which city you picked. Pick the one that fits the actual next chapter, not the fantasy version of the next chapter, but the one you're actually in. Building these breakdowns takes real time. If this was useful, please support the channel by subscribing. I cover a different city every few videos. See you in the next one.